Have you ever just stopped and really thought about what scares us the most as we look toward the future? The text we're examining today kicks off with a pretty profound, universal question: what is one of life's greatest worries? And according to our source material, it isn't necessarily failure or even getting sick. It's the deep-seated fear of growing old alone, the anxiety of lacking support, of being isolated and literally having no one there to care for us when we're at our most vulnerable. It's a heavy thought for sure, but it's an incredibly important one that spans across pretty much all human cultures.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to impartially unpack a very specific and honestly quite radical socio-philosophical solution to this exact problem of aging. We are going to be looking at a text outlining the philosophy of the Life Shunyuan community, specifically their concept of the second home, which is now known as New Oasis for Life. This source presents what they call a utopian blueprint designed to completely eliminate the fear of growing old. Now, we aren't here to endorse this viewpoint, but rather to break down exactly how this community constructs its argument and what its humanitarian strategy for elder care actually looks like on paper.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to start with the universal aging anxiety, explore the limits of traditional care, and then look at the second home solution itself. After that, we'll see how they go beyond just material needs, and finally, how they go about redefining the elderly role.
Let's start with Section 1, the universal aging anxiety, and specifically the fear of solitude. The text establishes a super relatable emotional core right off the bat, arguing that if the problem of elder care isn't solved completely, humanity's underlying anxiety can never truly be banished.
The source identifies what we might just call the insurance policy mindset. This is the historical idea that a massive reason people raise kids is essentially as a biological insurance policy. The motivation is rooted in that core fear that there might be no one around to take care of them or handle their end-of-life affairs later on. But according to the text, relying on this mindset breeds family conflicts, inheritance battles, and just constant worry for both the parents and the kids.
That brings us right into Section 2, Limits of Traditional Care, where the text outlines the flaws in the system we currently rely on. You know, the author totally acknowledges that humanity hasn't just ignored this problem. We've tried a lot of things over the millennia, building communities, monasteries, temples, and modern nursing homes. But the text makes a critical observation. Despite all these institutions, the core burden and, honestly, the core hope still traditionally and problematically falls squarely on the shoulders of the children.
And this brilliantly illustrates the source's main critique of our current setups. Listen to this vivid metaphor from the text. Relying solely on children or social help is like scratching an itch from outside the boot. It's such a great visual, right? The author is arguing that because kids might not always be reliable and broad social help often falls short, these partial solutions will never actually cure the root anxiety. You're just scratching the leather of the boot, but never actually reaching the itch. To elevate the urgency of this issue, the text philosophically grounds its argument by invoking major historical figures. It brings up Jesus Christ, Buddha, Prophet Muhammad, and even political figures like Marx, Lenin, and Mao Zedong. It notes that all these figures, in their own unique ways, sought to solve human tribulations and bring happiness. The author uses this historical framing to say, hey, the pursuit of universal happiness is a timeless human project, but insists the time for a permanent, practical solution is right now. We literally cannot just pass the buck down to the next generation.
So what exactly is this permanent solution? Let's move to Section 3, the second home solution, which the text frames as a utopian blueprint.
To ground this utopian philosophy in reality, the text gives us a concrete data point. At the time the source was written, the second home actually had exactly 9 permanent elderly residents, who they call Chenyuan Celestials, over the age of 60, including 2 in their 70s. Now, that's obviously a small number, but the author uses it to prove that their model is currently actively functioning in the real world and isn't just purely theoretical.
For these residents, the second home takes on total responsibility. The community provisions everything. We are talking food, clothing, shelter, transportation, healthcare, the whole shebang. By having the collective community completely take over these essential material needs, the individual's anxiety about basic survival is, theoretically, entirely removed. If we juxtapose these two models, you can really clearly see the paradigm shift the source is advocating for. On one side, you have the traditional model, relying on children or society, which the text argues inevitably leads to anxiety,
fear, and family conflict. But on the other side, you have the second home model, relying entirely on the collective home, which leads to total freedom from worry. The source believes that by completely shifting the responsibility off the nuclear family and onto the collective, all those inheritance anxieties and family burdens just evaporate.
But a good life is about way more than just surviving, right? That takes us to Section 4, beyond just material needs, focusing on holistic integration. The source strongly emphasizes that caring for the elderly absolutely cannot stop at physiological needs. It has to extend to the spirit and the soul. And a key requirement for this, according to the text, is integration. Elders must live among all ages. They shouldn't just be sequestered away in isolated facilities with only other older people. By living right alongside children, youth, and the middle-aged, older adults stay connected to the vibrancy of life and remain actually hopeful for the future.
Furthermore, the community focuses heavily on ongoing self-cultivation. The text includes this really profound philosophical quote: "One will not regret for dying in the afternoon if he or she has understood Tao in the morning." This perfectly illustrates that the elder years in the second home aren't viewed as just a waiting room for death, but rather as an active, spiritually fulfilling period dedicated to understanding deeper truths and refining oneself.
This active participation leads us perfectly to our final section, Section 5, Redefining the Elderly Role, where we see a shift from viewing them as a burden to viewing them as a mainstay.
So the crucial point here is this complete reversal of modern stereotypes. The text asserts that the life practice within the second home has actually proven that old people are absolutely not a burden. Quite the opposite, they are the very pillars, the mainstay of the community. The author notes that they get up early, work late, and silently contribute immense amounts of wisdom and selfless labor, taking on whatever tasks they can handle without ever complaining.
I absolutely have to highlight this striking and honestly slightly humorous quote from the source. There may be lazy young people, but there have been no lazy old people. It's a bold claim, and it directly challenges the way modern society often marginalizes the elderly as unproductive. In this community's framework, it's considered a massive blessing and a real structural advantage to have the elderly living and working right alongside everyone else. Ultimately, the text presents a vision of a harmonious fairyland for all ages. The end goal of this utopian blueprint is beautifully simple: a society where the young no longer depend on their parents and the old no longer depend on their children. By making the collective community the sole provider, true independence is theoretically achieved across all generational lines, completely eradicating that primal fear of growing old alone. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. How does this community's approach challenge your own modern views on aging, family duty, and dependency? Whether you view the second home's collective model as a brilliant humanitarian strategy or just an unrealistic utopian dream, it definitely forces us to critically examine how our own society treats its oldest members and what we actually expect from our own families. It's a fascinating perspective to consider for sure. Thanks for learning with me today, and keep questioning the world around you.